Just as we're getting going in the slides, which I don't actually depend on very much, there's a little bit about how you added walls to the model, about how we can customize wall styles. We can talk about that next time. And then there's this whole issue of doors and windows. Oops, I guess in the slides I was doing doors first. I guess it's this. Doors I tend to think of as being simpler because you don't have to worry about the sill height. They typically just sort of sit at 0, whereas windows, you have to worry about the sill height and the head height. But either way will work. So a little about doors, creating new door types, and windows. That's sort of where the slides are. But it's always choose the type, choose the size, give it a header height, and then just drop it in there, selecting the insertion point. And if it turns out to be in the wrong space, drag it around or flip it around, just treat it as an object. Okay, so let me go back into Revit and kind of give you a variation on this theme, which is I want a window that's not listed size-wise in the properties palette. So one thing that we run into, and that's going to talk about how you solve that problem first. So here's the scenario. I'm going to go place a window in here. I'm going to the type palette. I got these fantastic 36-inch wide windows. I got to put a window in here that's 48 inches wide or 50 inches wide or 60 inches wide, something like that. Okay. Panic! This is not the type that I need to go ahead and put in here. What can I possibly do? And here's the sort of most general principle you're going to keep on using again and again in this class, and that is all these different families, all these different component families are defined by different parameters which dictate ultimately how large they are, how they appear in your model. And you can change those parameters. So sometimes you can change those on a case-by-case basis. Sometimes you create classes or families or types that actually are a collection of a bunch of them. So what's happened is there's a predefined set of sizes here, like 36 by 48, 36 by 72. If you want to go through and create one that is instead 60 by 48, something like that, here's what you got to do. Well, go ahead, and what I usually do is I'll choose one that's pretty close to what I like as a starting point, and then I'll say edit the type. And if you say edit the type, you'll actually see a special type properties dialog show up, which tells you what the dimensions are that are determining it. So 4 feet high, 3 feet wide. Okay, super. That's kind of good. If I want to now go through and create a new one, okay, the easiest way or the best way to do it is actually to duplicate this. Okay, give it a new name and put some new parameters in there. Let's talk about the distinction about why you want to duplicate. If you go through into the properties palette and you just change the size, okay, to 50 by 48 or 60 by 48, okay, that's going to work for you moving downstream. The problem is, if anyone's actually placed some of those 36 by 48 windows already, they're going to get that new size too. Okay, so be cautious when you're changing these things. If you're making something just for yourself, especially if you're working in a team and other people may already be subscribing and using that type, okay, be cautious about changing it. If you really need to change, it's probably better to duplicate, to make your own version of it and then customize the duplicate. So what that looks like again is, cancel out of here. I'll just get to the type. I'll say edit the type. Then I will duplicate it. Now the first step is it's going to give us something that looks like the dimensions. It's really just a name. This is just how you see it in the menu. So if I want it to be 60 inches by 48 inches, I'm just really giving it a name that it'll show up in the menu and type selector as. And now I can go through and say, what is different about that? And in this case, I'll keep it at 48 inches, but I'm going to make it, what did I say, 60 inches. So I'll put that in there as the width. And I'll say that's either going to be 0.60, or I can say 5.0, whatever it is. Yeah, it'll do the math for you. Say okay. Well, actually, I should, if you're used to working in metric, yeah, you can type in US units and it'll convert to metric. You can type in metric units, it'll convert to US. It takes care of all that stuff for you. Okay. So now I have something new. It doesn't look very different yet over here. But when I go through and place this new type, you'll see it's in the type selector. And I go ahead and place it in here. You'll see I got a big one instead. Okay, so go ahead and drop some windows in there. Let me give you the other variation on these Revit component families. So these component families, one big thing. You have components loaded in. If you need to create a new size, some variation of the parameters, just create it, duplicate it, and go. The other thing you need to know is if fixed windows aren't what you have in mind, if you have casement windows or archtop windows, or you got some other geometry, something that's not just sort of a variation in the parameters, the size, but actually some fundamental change, you can go through and load in some more. So here's the other thing that works as a general principle for these component families, and that is you can load in more from libraries. Okay, so you can load more in from the Revit library, which is installed on your disk. You can load more in from, there's a lot of user group sites like Revit City, which have huge collections of libraries of pieces that you can load in for custom objects that aren't standardly in the system. You can go to some place called seek.autodesk.com, which is a big collection of manufacturers' parts that is put out there, kind of like Suite's catalog. So if a specific manufacturer has a specific component they'd like you to specify in their project, if they put a Revit model out there, you can load that in and drop it into your model. So how that works is, I'll stay under Windows. One of the choices here is load a family. And when you say load a family, if you have the library loaded, it'll be out there. If you don't have the library loaded, you're not seeing that right now. But we can go down to the window families. And what do I have? I have elliptical windows, I have fixed windows, I have awning windows, archtop windows. Let me put an archtop in there. You'll see that difference. And you can sort of see that this is a geometry that wouldn't be dictated or wouldn't be generated as just a size variation of that prior geometry. It's actually sort of a separate little piece. Got some louvered windows. Window for a round opening. I'm going to go with that archtop window. Okay, and we'll actually point you to some more libraries full of all my favorite windows that I've collected through the years. So open that up. What it's doing is loading it into our project. So now in the type selector, you'll see I have two different types of windows to work with. Not to worry, I'll just choose that archtop window. I'll go for a size there, and I'll put some of those on the back wall over here. Maybe I'll even put one in the corner here. Okay, so you can always load in new types as necessary. Here's that little archtop window that hangs around here. But beyond that, I need a new size, I need to change its height, whatever, that's okay. Works just the same as those other windows. Okay, now, if you got the handle of a window, question. What's that?
Can you pattern mirror or anything with components?
Set it, oh,
like
make,
I don't know,
make an array or flip them around?
SolidWorks, so you can pattern, array, whole nine.
Yep, all that, in fact, we'll play around with that next time in terms of, we can create arrays, we can create kind of distinct, all your common drafting, that works here too. They're just pieces. Okay. So, if you like the notion of windows, and you got the idea of windows, you got doors already. I didn't tell you about doors, but you know how to use doors, because it's really the same basic principle. We're going to come on in to the Architecture tab, choose door. We got some pretty boring single flush doors. These are those doors that have no panels on them, just pretty much, let's see an example of one right around here. But just a big old flat panel door. You can choose a size like, 36 inches wide by 80 inches tall. And you go placing a door in your model. Now doors do have like one funny nuance that windows don't. Doors still have an inside and an outside, that's okay. But one nuance that they have that you should be aware of is they also have this notion of which way they swing, which side the hinge is on, and is it going to swing in or is it going to swing out. So as you're placing doors, you can sort of indicate, is it left or right? And if you don't like the direction the hinge is on, you can hit the tab or the space bar, and it'll flip between them. Put those doors in there. Let me kind of move this around a little bit in this 3D view. Actually, I'm going to close that one up and re-window tile so we can see more of this. Going to flip around a little bit. There's those doors on the other side of the building. Actually, I should tell you a quickie way of sort of moving around in the building. In terms of, we sort of talked about panning, we talked about zooming a little bit. The other sort of things are just orbiting around. In terms of orbiting under the little steering wheel, orbiting will let you sort of move any arbitrary space. But a real quick way that I often use is this little guy up here called the view cube. And the view cube will take your 3D view and just really quickly move you to different orientations. So just to kind of speed that up for you. Okay, so here's those archtop windows and those doors. Actually, if you look in here, you can see there is some little distinction between the door that's going in and the door that's going out about where the door is relative to the inside and the outside surface of the walls. But if you need to change that door, just go ahead and choose it, flip it. Flip won't actually show you very much because there's no door handle on this door. But I can also rotate it over. But, so place doors. Now, once you got that door in there, if you want to change the size of the door, okay, you know, because you know it's from Windows, that you can always come over here to the type selector, choose a different type from here. Oh, but the size that I want isn't listed here. What can I possibly do? And it's that same basic principle. You need a 24-inch door because you have very skinny people who have to get into a very narrow hallway. And what you have going on there is we will edit that type and duplicate that type. And you're going to do this a lot through the quarter. And make a new type. Again, that's just a name. But then we go through and put in the size. Okay, so feel pretty good? Say OK, and I got a 24-inch door. And that's OK for changing sizes. But in our little house here, you know, if it was all these flat panel doors, that'd be pretty boring and exciting. I have a little more architectural flair than that. I need some nice double glass French door that's going to take you out to the beautiful patio or something like that. So again, think about what you want to do. And we can go out and load in a family. You always have the option, I should warn you about with the tabs. You can always go to the Insert tab and load. It'll be available then. The other way is if you choose the type like door, it'll be available because that makes sense. You might want to load one. So it can show up contextually too, but I'll say load a family. Go out to the doors. And we have all these double glass without any sort of dividers, double glass with dividers, panel doors. There's really quite an interesting collection of those. And we'll play with some more with these next time and figure out how to define our own. But I'm going to get one of those double glass doors. Something like that. They're very, very popular these days. Yes?
So if you place two doors right next to each other, it won't automatically.
Nah, it doesn't know how to join them. It'll still keep a little of the jam in between. So, yeah, important distinction. Because you can probably make it look right. But yeah, ultimately it'd be better to go ahead and have a real double door in there. Good question. Okay. I got my double door. I'll open it in here. Let's drop one of these in. So I'll put it in the back wall here. Again, I can put it in 3D also. Come over to this window. We'll put two in there. Okay, got the glass. It's looking good. Oops, mine shouldn't open out. They want to open in, whatever it is. You can kind of flip that all around. And even here, actually, I should tell you about this. It's all that same sort of thing. I can hug these up right next door to each other and align them with each other. I can go through and do things. Oh, let me move that one over a little. Kind of to your question about like, can you kind of control them in interesting ways? Here's the mirror command, and I can basically like pick a mirror axis or draw a mirror axis. And if I try real hard, I'll find the center point of the wall. Draw that in there. Yeah, all that kind of stuff is in there. So put them in there. Okay, and now I got some doors. Okay, so doors, windows, works very, very similar. But in the hierarchy of things, these are not system families, these are called component families. Okay, because you choose them as individual objects as opposed to just big Traxo geometry. Okay, that you specify the boundary. Okay, we're doing good. There's two more things we want to add to this little house to get it all finished. We want to put a floor on the bottom. We want to put a roof on the top. And it turns out those two things are amazingly similar to each other. Okay, because floors are really determined in this way. They're considered a system family where we really draw a boundary and we say, okay, here's a type of floor, fill it into that boundary. Okay. Roofs are actually amazingly similar to floors, about the only distinction, they're kind of horizontal planes, is that they're not strictly horizontal. They may have some tilt to them. So we have a little bit of extra control in terms of how much we want to have them tilting and how that geometry is determined. But where they're really dictated and how we specify them is very similar. So let's show you how you do that. Okay, for floors, we can sort of do it in the floor plan view. We can do it in the 3D view also, but let's keep it simple for today. I'll grab that little building right there. And let's go ahead and put a floor in there. To do that, what we're going to do is actually, under the Architecture tab, choose the Floor tool. So let's kind of roll the fourth column over there. You'll find some different options, but we're going to choose an architectural floor. It'll become more important when we start talking about structural modeling. And now we have, again, this notion of there's always a type and some information about how it should be placed. So types, let's take a look at that. We can put a nice generic 12-inch floor of some mystery material in there. We can put in a 10-inch joist floor that has ceramic tiles, a 10-inch joist floor that has wood finish. And again, we can change these types. If it turns out we need smaller, taller joists, whatever it is, we're going to put a different finish on the floor. We can do that too. And because it's types, anything that we place, we can change the type of if later on we decide we want to make it something different. So it's always going to be, there's a type to the geometry. In terms of the drawing options, we still have very similar drawing options up here. We can draw the floor. We can sort of make a rectangle to kind of create the floor. One thing I'm going to suggest, though, that's actually very, very powerful is down in this lower portion of the little drawing tools palette, there's actually a couple choices that are sort of interesting down there. You'll see there's like a little green line, and there's also a little like arrow pointing. And that's all about picking another object to define your boundary. So you can always draw a boundary. That's okay. Any arbitrary place you can draw a boundary. But picking a boundary is kind of an interesting thing to do, because what happens is, if I say I want the boundary to be the side of this, the nice thing is if this moves, the boundary will move with it. Okay, if I do the floors, if I say I want the boundary of the floor to be the wall core, the nice thing is if the wall moves, the floor will move with it, as opposed to drawing it, which would sort of leave them, they happen to be in the same place, but they're not really understood to be the same thing. So locking them is actually a very powerful thing to do. So do that whenever you can. So in this case, I'm going to choose, for example, this wood finish floor. It's going to be at level 1, because I'm drawing on level 1 right now. In terms of actually drawing it, let me go ahead and just choose the pick wall tool, as opposed to drawing it. I'm going to show you arbitrarily. Arbitrarily, I could just draw. Okay, and that's going to put a floor out there. And when it's created, it'll show up there. Instead, what I'm going to do is use the pick wall tool. Pick wall actually does have a little bit of nuance to it right there. There's this notion when I pick the walls, should I draw that to the core of the wall or draw it to the outside or inside face of the wall? The truth is, when it's choosing by default, core is usually the better choice, because the way we tend to build things, we'll have a floor, we'll have the studs line right up to it. So we have a wall. It has a core layer, whether it's block or stud, whatever it is. There'll be some outside finish on it, whether it's stucco or siding, whatever it is. There'll be some sort of inside finish. So this is like a section through the wall. I should apologize. And so that's like looking through the wall, cut sideways. So there's this core layer. And then with that core, when we're placing the floor, the question is, do I want the floor to come all the way out here, the outside surface, where you can actually see the edge of the floor from the outside? Or would I actually like it to stop back here at the face of the core? And we'll learn when we build things, that's actually typically the better relationship, to have it stop at the core and then let the finish wrap around the floors. That way you don't see the floors hanging out in a multi-story building. The finish just wraps over the whole thing. Okay, and that's what this choice is all about, extending the core. So let's go ahead and put a floor in here. I will pick the walls. Notice when I'm picking the walls, I have the choice of, it sort of guess the inside of the core. I'm going to flip it so it's the outside, because cores have an inside and an outside too. I'll pick that wall, this wall, this wall, this wall, and that wall. I'm getting them all. You might notice that on these brick walls down here, the core is a little bit further in. The brick is a much thicker exterior layer than the other walls, but that's okay. It's all going to the face of what's considered the core. And after you've defined the geometry, here's the only thing you have to watch out for floors. We'll play around with this again a lot next week. Yeah, floors have to be cohesive boundaries. They have to be continuous boundaries that go all the way around. It has to be a loop that joins. If yours isn't a loop, it won't join. It won't know how to create things. It has to kind of really fill the loop. And we'll say just complete it by clicking the green check mark to finish that. And we'll put a floor in there. Now, the cool thing about floors that are dictated this way is if things like the walls move, if I can grab the wall, that's all the walls. Let's do it in 3D, that might be easier to see. Pull that out. Notice the floor is going to move with it, which is kind of cool. Pull that out, the floor moves with it. Let me just kind of make that shorter. That'll be useful to me in a second. So, going ahead and hinging walls or hanging the walls on the floors is actually a good thing to do. The cool thing also is since it's an object, if I choose that floor and it turns out I don't like wood and it's going to be ceramic tile or something like that, I just choose the new surface. It looks like it's a pretty boring sort of thing right there. I didn't see much of a visual difference there. Let me try something else. How about the carpet finish? Okay. Oh, so did you have the boundary drawn all the way around? Okay. Do you have a little green checkbox up in the Modify Floors tab? The check mark. Okay, click on that and see what happens. So what the question is once you've drawn the boundary, it's kind of this point. You've edited the boundary. How do you actually complete it? How do you actually make it generate the geometry? And it's typically the green check mark. Fills that on in. So system family, again, we drew some sort of boundary. We draw something to dictate the geometry. Boom, something kind of fills in. It creates an object to sort of fill that based on a type. Okay, last but not least, we're going to put a roof on this thing. Okay, if you got the handle on the floor, you know how to do the roof, because I'm really just going to give you 2 little variations on top of that. It's always, we lure you down the path and give you 1 or 2 more variables you have to worry about. Okay, roofs are like floors. In fact, flat roofs are amazingly like floors. But if we want to put a slope on the roof, we'll go ahead and show you how to do that. The other thing we somehow do with roofs that we have to worry about is that often when we put roofs on, we don't just stop them at the edges. A lot of times, especially in residential construction, we have them overhang so that we have a little protection of the walls and stuff like that. So let's show you how that works. Now, when you place a roof, it's going to look just like placing a floor. But we're going to start worrying about what level we place it at, because the floor was good to be at level 1. The roof we typically like to put up at level 2 or a higher level. So when we draw it, we could really draw it on any specific level, but ultimately we'd like it to be hosted or live at level 2, okay, in the hierarchy of the objects. So the way we make that happen is we can just double click on level 2. Let me go ahead and make that a little bit bigger. Zoom it to fit. This is going to look amazingly like level 1. But we're now at level 2, so anything we draw at this level is going to be considered to be at level 2. What we're going to do now is, under the Architecture tab, choose the Roof tool. Say Roof by Footprint. We have a lot of different ways of generating roofs, but by footprints is a particularly good one, just drawing them in the floor plan view. Okay. Similar things. What type of roof? Is it a generic roof? Is it a wood rafter roof? Is it a glass roof? What is it? And I'll make it a wood rafter roof right now. Okay. We're going to have these options about how to draw it. Are we drawing lines? Are we picking walls? I'm going to pick walls again. That's actually, again, one of the strongest relationships put in place. Another variable we have, though, that you can play with is the notion of overhang. Do you want it to be right at the edge of the wall, or do you want to overhang it 1 foot or 2 foot? Something like that. And I'm going to put in over here for the overhang, say 2 feet, 2'0" now. Kind of as a nice standard one. I'll put that all around. Later, we're going to learn that really it makes good sense to actually have different overhangs on different sides of the building relative to the sun and kind of what we're trying to do. But architecturally, it's often easy just to do this too. And I will click on those different walls. Notice as I click on the wall or hover over the wall, it suggests which side it might be on. I'm going to click on all those walls and hopefully get a nice continuous boundary. Ultimately, very much like the floor, we need a continuous boundary. Yeah. Oh, are you on level 2? Okay, if your walls don't actually go up to level 2, it may not be showing up. No worries. You can do it on level 1 also. Just go back to level 1 and do it there. and we can shove it up to level 2 later. Okay, but go ahead and draw that boundary. That's looking pretty good. We have basically the wall, or the boundary of the roof. We have over here this little indicator of where the slope is going to be. So currently, this is defined to be a hip roof. That's one that will slope up from all the different sides. And in the same sense, when we click on the little green finish, it'll put a roof on there. Now, it's not showing you the whole roof here because every floor plan view has a cut in it, and this is where the roof would get cut off 4'6" above level 2. But if you go back and look at the 3D view, you'll see it actually has a roof. And again, the cool thing about this is in that same funny sense, if I move the wall, the floor is going to move, the roof's going to move, it's all going to stay together. Okay, now in our last couple of minutes of today's session, what I'll do is I'm going to show you how we take this and put it onto sheets. And just kind of watch along for this one in terms of actually creating those final views. Because, we're going to do this all next week. But the basic idea of creating a building and kind of enclosing the space, you got it. That's really pretty much what it is. So now it's just an exercise of getting this back to some 2D views you can put on sheets. So here's how that looks. Basically, sheets is really just an element. Like all these different things, I'll say let's make a new sheet. Again, don't worry about following along now. We'll do this next time together. There's some notion of a title block on the sheet, and here's a big blank piece of paper. And really what we'd like to do is get some of our views onto these sheets. So the cool thing is a lot of these views have been created for us automatically. As we've been going and doing our modeling in 3D, we have views. So for example, here's the level 1 floor plan view. Now we can sort of bring the whole model in. A very good thing we'll learn to do is crop the model. Let me see if I can show you what that looks like. That's the cropping area. So this is very much like cropping a photo. I'm just going to bring it in so it's a little bit tighter. Okay, I'll go back to that sheet view. And what I'm going to do is just drag the view in. And there's my floor plan view. Similarly, if I want to get the elevations in there, I can do the same sort of thing. So I can go ahead and draw the south elevation in. Bring in the north elevation. Bring in the east and west. So again, these are all just camera views that were pre-set up, and we'll sort of learn how to control these things. Looking pretty good? Okay. If you want to get that 3D view that we keep on playing around with, we can get that one in there too. So we can say 3D views and pull it in. Might be a funny scale. And if we want to get a camera view in there, same sort of thing. We're just going to create a view and drag it onto the sheets. So I'll say, go back to the floor plan. I'll put a camera in that sort of faces it like this. That's my little 3D view. Let me zoom out a little bit. I'll shade that, whatever it is I want to do. However I have it looking here, I'll take the sheet view. Oops. Ah, that's looking bad. Bring that in there. One last view you can bring in there. It's not only all these graphical views. If, for example, we actually wanted to go through and have like a schedule that showed something like, oh, the windows. I can bring those in. Again, say that I want to put the family, I want to put the heights, the widths. Okay, that's just another view of the data. It's the same database, just another view. There's that schedule. When I want to bring that onto the sheet, I'm just going to drag it on in here. I'll put it right there. So, one model, lots of different views of the same model. When it's ultimately time to communicate it, we just sort of isolate and set up each of the cameras so we're viewing it when we want to look at that data, pull it onto the sheets, and then either share it or print it or whatever it is we're doing. Okay, so that's your whirlwind tour of like that's the sort of span of what we're doing, at least for the first half of the class, is doing that. And when we come on back Tuesday, we'll spend, go through a lot more nuance and detail to give you a lot of control over different types of walls, different types of windows, and how you customize all these things. Okay? So, yes? I'll give out the first assignment like next Tuesday. It'll be due the following Tuesday. Yeah, we always try to give you a weekend to kind of like get yourself in trouble and promise yourself to get it all done. And yeah, but it sounds so much better if you have a weekend, doesn't it? Okay, so great. Let's go ahead and break for today.